Over the next 20 years, the Great Wealth Transfer will see over $70 trillion of value transferred from baby boomers to their heirs. It will be the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in history. But do you know who will not benefit from the Great Wealth Transfer and why? The answers may surprise you. Let's parlay. Hi, folks. This is Mike Barcella, and welcome to Let's Parlay. Today, we will discuss the GI Bill, how it created wealth for millions of families, but left others out in the cold, sometimes literally. You know, whenever my children accompany me to our local hardware store and I wear my Army cap, my kids get a kick out of it when people say thanks for your service. And they think it's really cool that in some stores and online stores, I get a 10% military discount because I'm an Army veteran. And I appreciate that. In fact, one of them said, "Hey, Dad, it makes sense to go into the military because I can save all this money on my purchases." I chuckle at that. But in seriousness, with any important life decision, I have to explain the pros and cons and the history, especially the history of America and its military. I have to explain to them why books by Black authors are being removed from the libraries of West Point and Annapolis, the Naval Academy, and why military installations are being renamed after Confederate generals who fought to maintain slavery and who were treasonous against their country. I also teach them about wealth generation in the US and the role the military and government and states played in the single most important wealth generating event of the past 100 years. And this is the GI Bill. The GI Bill was America's promise to its returning heroes. On June 22nd, 1944, President Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, known as the GI Bill. The GI Bill offered college tuition, low-cost mortgages, and job training to every returning veteran. What better way to reward America's heroes than to give them the keys of intergenerational wealth? But unfortunately, the GI Bill was systematically denied to Black veterans. And this prevented thousands of Black veterans who served their country from buying homes and receiving a college education. Now, you may ask, why is this important? Well, for most middle-class Americans, home ownership is the biggest key in us creating intergenerational wealth and passing that wealth to our heirs. If you don't own a home, your wealth as a middle-class American is much less, and it's difficult to kickstart the flywheel of intergenerational wealth. Systematic housing barriers have long created generational wealth disparities in America. For example, redlining prevented Black families from obtaining home loans, which hindered home ownership and wealth building. Now, along with discriminatory employment practices, these systemic issues have had long-lasting and negative effects on opportunities for wealth creation for African Americans. But let's focus on the GI Bill. From the start, implementation of the GI Bill was left to state and local officials. Southern legislators in particular insisted on state administration of the GI Bill to preserve Jim Crow controls, ensuring that white veterans reaped the benefits of their service, while Black veterans faced locked doors at every turn. Now, we'll get into Jim Crow in a separate discussion, but basically, Jim Crow was a set of laws and customs from the late 19th through mid-20th centuries that enforced racial segregation and denied African Americans equal rights and opportunities. So we know that there were large disparities in how the GI Bill was implemented in the South, but in the North, surely it must have been different, right? Unfortunately, no. Even in the northern New Jersey suburbs, part of the post-war housing boom, fewer than 100 of the 67,000 VA-insured mortgages under the GI Bill, fewer than 100 of the 67,000 mortgages went to people of color. Banks and real estate boards used redlining to deny loans, while deeds included racist covenants barring Black families from entire communities. So the GI Bill loan guarantee was powerless, especially when private lenders simply refused to finance home purchases for Black veterans. Now, this is near and dear to my heart. because I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I live in northern New Jersey, and I happen to be Black. When I was a child, my family experienced some of this racism when we moved from Brooklyn to the suburbs of Long Island. Towns like Levittown actually had racist covenants, formal agreements that indicated that properties could not be sold to people of color, nor could banks lend to people of color to purchase properties in Levittown. The original agreements had clauses stating that these homes could only be occupied by members of the Caucasian race, though white homeowners were allowed to hire non-white domestic servants. Now, imagine Sergeant James Carter of Newark, New Jersey. He was trained as a military technician in Europe, fought for his country, and he returned home eager to build a life with his wife and family. He applied for a GI mortgage in Essex County, New Jersey, only to be told, "We don't lend to your kind here." He enrolled at a vocational trade school, paid out of his own pocket, while his white comrades walked across campus on college scholarships. Now, Sergeant Carter's story wasn't unique, and it also echoes through generations. Education under the GI Bill was another broken promise. While white veterans flooded state universities, Black veterans, in New Jersey especially, found seats at overcrowded and underfunded institutions, or none at all. Counselors steered them into vocational schools rather than four-year colleges, citing segregation standards that had no legal basis in the federal law itself. Again, under state and local governments, anything can happen. Even the best ideals can be perverted to disadvantage so many. So far, we've discussed home ownership and education, but unfortunately, the stakes went far beyond just houses and diplomas. Home equity and degrees catalyzed the white middle class boom. But for Black veterans in New Jersey, exclusion meant lifelong barriers to wealth and opportunity. Studies show that the racial wealth gap we see today traces directly to these post-war denials. The GI Bill, designed to reward service, instead deepened economic divides that persist in our state and our nation. 75 years later, New Jersey communities are confronting this legacy. Legislators have introduced bills to restore benefits to surviving Black World War II veterans and their descendants. Local nonprofits host oral history projects, bringing Sergeant Carter's and thousands of other stories back into public memory. True repair starts with acknowledgement and action. My name is Mike, and thank you for joining Let's Parlay. If you're a New Jersey veteran or a descendant with a GI Bill story, we want to hear from you. Visit the5thirds.com to share your experiences and learn how you can support ongoing reform efforts. Because in honoring our military veterans' service, we rebuild the promise of equality that they all earned. Let's keep talking, and let's keep building a future worthy of our veterans' sacrifice. 5/3, unbreakable.